Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Jonathan, is this on? Jonathan? Testing. Oh, that one's on. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here at Intersections. We are glad to have you, whether you are in person here in the room or whether you are online. I'm very happy to be with you today in this lovely, lovely warm weather that we are having in Iowa. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. We host the Intersections Luncheon each month here in Cedar Rapids. And really at the core of what Intersections is about is civil dialogue on important issues that impact our communities. And so glad to have you with us. In case I forget to announce it at the end, I'll try and do that again. Intersections for January 2nd is going to be online only. And so we are going to have a panel of folks that are going to talk about issues around immigration. And just with the weather and the holidays, and it being the 2nd of January, we thought we would just make it easy on everyone and do that from the comforts of our home. So you can note that to yourself, and hopefully you will join us for that as well. But today I'm excited to introduce to you Joan Flecksing, who is going to talk about the care of our natural resources. Joan is the director of the Meskwaki Nation Department of Natural Resources. And she's going to talk about the natural resources of our state from the perspective of the Meskwaki Nation. Joan is, as I said, the director of the Meskwaki Nation Department of Natural Resources, and she, as she writes, is honored with the responsibility for the natural resource management and environmental health of tribal lands for the Meskwaki Nation, the people of the Red Earth. She works in support of the initiatives and staff of the department while striving to ensure the protection, preservation, and restoration of the natural and environmental resources of the Sac and Fox tribe in the Mississippi and Iowa, always in honor of the culture of the Meskwaki people. Raised in rural Iowa and the youngest of 12 children, really. Wow. Joan grew up with a strong connection to the land for sustenance, its spiritual relevance, and recreation. This instilled in her passions for conservation and land management, sustainable agriculture, and construction and public service. Consequently, Joan pursued and worked in the natural resource, environmental, and agricultural fields. Upon earning a Bachelor of Science in Conservation Management and Public Administration, Joan was hired as the park manager of Pleasant Creek State Recreation Area in Powell, Iowa. She also partnered to establish and co-own a buffalo ranch, eventually maintaining an 130 head herd. Joan served as Director of Operations for Matthew 25 in Cedar Rapids. I know Matthew 25 is near and dear to everyone's heart here in Cedar Rapids. Working in green construction initiatives, neighborhood revitalization, urban farming, and sustainability. After graduation from Drake University, go Bulldogs, with an MPA, she went on to serve as Chief Operations Officer of the National Czech and Slavic Museum and Library in Cedar Rapids. So help me to welcome Joan Flecksing. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me. Is this on? Okay, good. I'm going to start. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm going to start with just a little video.
Is it flip on side?
On the side. There we go. There we go.
In the heart of America, the east and west, where the sun meets the earth, lies a nation rich in heritage and resilience. Welcome to the beating heart of the Meskwaki Nation, where every step is a dance, every word a song, and every moment a celebration of who we are. Here, in the embrace of our tribal family, we find strength beyond measure. Our culture is not just a heritage, it's a beacon of hope guiding us through the darkest of times.
Shake a hand, like. Oh, the truck.
With every word spoken in our language, we breathe life into our traditions, and with every dance, we honor the spirits of our ancestors. Look around you, and you'll see the living embodiment of our heritage. Each success story is a testament to the resilience of our people, a reminder that greatness flows in our veins. Our journey is not just about preserving the past, it's about building a future that honors our legacy. Through economic empowerment and sustainable initiatives, we're paving the way for generations yet to come. From modern infrastructure to thriving businesses, every endeavor is a testament to our resilience and determination. With each new project, we reaffirm our commitment to our people, to our land, and to our culture. Today, as the sun rises over our nation, we stand tall, owning more than just acres of soil. We own our destiny. So, my brothers and sisters, let us rise together. Let us dance together. Let us celebrate together. For in unity, we find strength. In culture, we find our purpose. And in our tribe, we find home.
I thought that was just a good introduction to the community that I'm honored to represent for you today, the Meskwaki Nation, the people of the Red Earth. Above on the screen is a map that shows the Meskwaki and the Sauk migration, and how they came to be in here, your neighbors in Iowa. They come from the far northeast corner of what is the United States of America and into Canada. They were moved. Migration is, I think, a nice term to describe how our federal government moved tribes to locations that they wanted them to live at. And the Meskwaki people did spend some time along the Iowa River corridor, but yet were not intended to stay there, and were moved further south into Kansas and Missouri area. And 4 Meskwaki men decided that, our community does not prefer this land and really prefers the Iowa River corridor. As a woodlands people, whom they are, they wanted obviously to be in an area that felt more like home to them. So those 4 men came back to Iowa, and may come as no surprise to anybody in this room that some kind-hearted European settlers who had enjoyed being their neighbors initially, the Meskwaki's neighbors, offered and accepted offers to sell land to these men. And they sold them 80 acres there along the Iowa River in what is now Tama County. And that began the relationship of this tribe that is our neighbors here in Iowa. The Meskwaki are the Fox of the Sac and Fox. And today they own roughly 9,000 acres. About 8,000 of that is located in Tama County. The remainder is located in Palo Alto County in northwestern Iowa. But they are the only tribal nation in the United States of America that owns all of their land. None of their land is reserved or ceded to them by the federal government. So as the director of their Natural Resources Department, I am blessed to be responsible for management of their lands and all of their environmental programs that are intended to interlace their culture, their spirituality, their way of life in their land management, as it's all one to them. Each piece begets another. And that's their relationship with the land that they have had for thousands of years traditionally, and they continue that today. So a little bit about myself and how who I am plays into that responsibility. I am also of Native heritage. I am not Meskwaki. I am Tarahumaran, which is Mexican Indian from the northern mountains of Mexico. My mother's grandmother was sold to her first husband at about the age of 12 or 13. And he worked for the company that was the Southern Pacific Railroad that was building the railroad. She came into California with him. She had children with him. Her husband and children would all be killed from smallpox, and she was covered with smallpox scars herself. And she would then marry a second man, a California Indian, who had been orphaned at a Catholic mission as an infant. And so we don't know our California tribe. I suppose I could do like a DNA thing and try to figure that out. The California tribes were severely decimated in particular, so it may not be a simple process to find that relationship. And I think, frankly, because of assimilation, my family, never pursued that avenue. My mother was raised by her grandparents in California, in the Long Beach and Bakersfield area, with a strong understanding that assimilation meant survival and meant hopefully quality of life, right? So when I see photos of my great grandparents, my great grandfather's wearing a suit and a tie, my grandmother's wearing a polka dot dress, and they're standing next to an old Ford Model A or something, and trying to look as white as possible. It didn't really work, but they sure look like honorable people. So my mom and dad met there in California. My dad was in the Navy during the Korean War. He's a German farm boy from Toddville, Iowa. And they met on a blind date. And I think my mom thought it would be so cool to come to Iowa and see snow and farms. And they would only be here like a year. And my dad was supposed to go back to a job there in the oil fields. And 63 years later, 12 children later, they never made it back. So I was raised in a multiracial family in rural Iowa. I'm the youngest of those 12 kids, and I would say I was raised in a dynamic home. My mom brought these really progressive ideas from the West Coast and continued to always build on those progressive ideas. And we were expected to, question and think and be independent and argue and find our way with an understanding that we were put on this earth to make this earth a better place and to contribute to society, even when, no matter how difficult. So at a young age, we were always outside because we were not wanted inside. Right? So, we were always outside playing. I was raised in a what I would call a homesteading setting, raised in horticulture, food sovereignty, small scale agriculture. My first job, actually, sorry, I have to do this. My first employers are here, and they became like second parents to me. I worked on the Sovereign Llama Farm from the age of 12 to 17. And I have to say, I always loved being outside. And so myself and Mabel and Alice, two very large dogs, Great Pyrenees, we hung out, shoveled a lot of manure, fed a lot of llamas, and it made me a really good student athlete. I was so strong physically, and I just loved being outside. and I loved that work. I think that would, I was raised with goats and chickens and everything under the sun, and I think that would lead into, me and my love of bison and raising bison, and I've been blessed to have that repeat in my life, strangely, having my own herd and now raising buffalo for the Meskwaki Nation, which is maybe an odd thing in Iowa, right? So I'm very blessed in that. But so that led me into my interest in the environment, protecting natural resources, conservation management, and working for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources for 18 years. I got to manage your state recreation area. That was a wonderful base to my career and who I am. I learned a lot of things the hard way, which is often my favorite way to learn for some reason. And then basically when I left the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, I was seeking, I really needed development, and I needed to get my graduate degree. I needed to manage bigger budgets. I needed to just grow up, frankly, because it was getting too, I was getting too complacent working for the Iowa DNR, and I didn't want to do that for 40 years and retire with this sense of complacency. So I took a risk, and I've been very fortunate in that, had a lot of support from friends and family in that. So regardless, today, as director of the Department of Natural Resources, it's been really a neat experience in that I grew up always going to the Meskwaki powwow. I think that was one time of the year that my mom felt at home. In particular, she just loved going to the powwow and cultural events at Coe College, and I'm the baby, so I was drug along to every political thing she did and every art related thing she did, and that was very good for me. But we all grew up going to the powwow, and we didn't dance. My mom did not promote that. I think that was although her culture was important in our home, and I would say the primary culture versus my father's German culture. So that they had this interesting, his family settled in the Toddville Palo area in 1838. So 1837 is when the Iowa, the Sac and Fox were pushed out of this area. So as soon as land could be purchased after treaties were signed, my German ancestors came to this area and began farming. So I had this interesting clash of cultures in the home I grew up in and personalities, if you know my parents, and this great deep and love and respect for our natural world around us. And interestingly, I think I got probably learned more of that from my German father, because he had grown up so deeply living off the land, more or less, as a child during the Great Depression and so on and so forth. So a very, very interesting contrast, but yet similarity. And as that comes into my work, I have this ability to some degree to understand the indigenous culture, which is so important to serving a tribal community. And yet that balance of being in rural Iowa, which is agriculture capital of the world, essentially. So although I worked for the Department of Natural Resources and got that good base of land management, managing a recreation area, it's a little different than a state park because I got to do more land management, which is essentially what I wanted to do. Land management through that agency is very complicated because, as you know, they're very poorly funded. The opportunity of working for the tribe is that I work for a sovereign nation whose partners are federal, not state. So this is a very interesting situation in Iowa. When I look at the tribe's land, I really see it as an ecological island in Iowa. It is their land management is extremely progressive. I know that I could not manage land in the manner that I do if I was working for a county conservation board or the state of Iowa, for political reasons, quite frankly. I did teach as an adjunct professor at Kirkwood Community College for about 5 years in the natural resources program. And I would always tell my students, Iowa is agriculturally controlled politically because of the fiscal power that lies within that. So when you're doing conservation work in Iowa, it may seem futile to some degree. You know, we're not running around at Yellowstone on over 1 million acres. I'm sure that's a very different experience. But I would always impress upon them, think of the impact that you're making. It's like a little seed in this mass of agriculture. It's a huge impact because of the scale. And so it's so very important, the work that we are doing, and to not give up on it and to keep doing it. So working for the Meskwaki Nation, you know, I don't have to use chemicals doing land management. It's not required of me to do flyovers to spray invasive species in the woods, as other agencies do, as it's a normal practice. That's just one simple example, but yet a huge step toward truly managing conservation in an effective manner for both the earth, wildlife, and humans. So my slides are really rudimentary. I try to just give you some visuals while I'm rambling on, but this is the settlement in Tama, the boundaries of it. Like I said, it's just about 7,800 acres. As you can see, the Iowa River traverses through that area. It is predominantly upland and lowland woodland forests. There is no farmland on the settlement, no agriculture per se, no large scale. The tribal operations is very robust. I'm not sure if any of you have ever been to the settlement or even to the casino. The casino is their primary funding source, of course, but the tribal operations, most folks don't realize that there's tribal government, just like there's state government, city government, county government. Tribal governments are in relation with the federal government through treaty rights and trusts, and that develops those federal partnerships where the federal government is required to support tribes constantly in determining self-determination and sovereignty in all their work. So some of you would remember the Indian Restoration Act, which really created that domestic dependency, as if the tribes are children of the federal government, always dependent, like always crying out for support and help. And we, as a leader for the Meskwaki Nation and the Meskwaki people, now we constantly work with the federal government. I always say that's my greatest responsibility, is constantly reminding our federal partners, that word is so important, that the Meskwaki people are a sovereign nation. They are self-determined to make their own decisions and to lead themselves with that constant relationship that the federal government, frankly, it's unfortunate, owes them in preserving, retaining, and maintaining that self-determination. And that can be pretty complicated at times, quite frankly. You know, we still meet with resistance to this day in being independent human beings on their own land, which is unfortunate. And I think will go on to the end of time to some degree. So as I was saying about agriculture, the tribe did farm traditionally, or I would say up until about 2021, the last of the farmland was taken out and put into CRP lease with the United States Department of Agriculture, NRCS. As a leader for the tribe, I am sensitive to leases with the federal government. If you can understand, not to get too deep into it, but if you've heard of mitigation banking, that is a relationship where, let's say Walmart's going to build a wetland and I do have opinions about this too. They're gonna build a building in a wetland, forgive me.
Yeah.
And of course, that's where you should build a Walmart. And often that is where they build a Walmart. Because you can't build a house there or a school or something, but you can put a Walmart there. So then you need to build a wetland somewhere else to replace that wetland. But can we replace a wetland? I mean, come on. No, we can't replace a wetland. But to do that, you have to go through a process called mitigation banking, which involves exchange of money. So we're going to pay to be able to build in this wetland, and then land that you then replace. So that the new fancy wetland over here is going to be banked and held in lease with the United States Department of Agriculture till the end of time. And there's a lot of things that go into this, and I'm not probably explaining it perfectly, but it's important that, you know, as a land manager for a tribe, I be sensitive to tying up land permanently with the federal government or for very long periods of time. But yet we want to have that healthy relationship with the NRCS and what they can offer us in land management and partner with them. So the tribe has just a small amount, about 160 acres of organic crops right now that is just set aside land that's to be developed. Roughly 1,600 acres of conservation reserve, which is absolutely, it's beautiful. It's important for wildlife. It takes a lot of management. You cannot just plant a prairie and then walk away from it. And so what I'm describing to you when I describe the woods and the prairies, and that is the work that our Land and Wildlife branch of the Department of Natural Resources, they are doing that field work day in and day out. And wow, it's almost 12:30. Day in and day out to manage the land effectively. We do a lot of mechanical work to avoid chemical use. This is the tribe's land in Palo Alto County. That is roughly 800 acres. That is an interesting story. So those of you that are married will understand that opposites often attract. And this land is indicative of that. A woman who was a widow wanted to leave this land to the Iowa Department of Natural Resources in the late 80s. And understandingly, you do have to, public lands do have to be open to the public. And she wasn't interested in that. She wanted it set aside as a preserve for no hunting or trapping. And so she reached out to the Meskwaki Nation and did leave this land to the Meskwaki people. And as you can see, the ponds on it, those are actually her husband. He mined that land for sand. And do you guys see that river? That's the Des Moines River. So interestingly, the Meskwaki Nation owns rights to the Des Moines River. And what do we know about the Des Moines River? And nitrates.
Yes.
So that leads me into the tribe's water quality standards. We are in process right now. They're with the EPA. I submitted them on July 7th. Water quality standards for the Iowa River, which if I urge you to go to the Meskwaki Nation website, and if you go to Department of Natural Resources, you'll be able to see those standards. They are considerably more stringent than those of the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. This has been a long process for this department. I would say going on 10 years. It's the Meskwaki Nation is saying to you, their neighbors, you have a right to clean water. We have a right to clean water, and we're going to go get it for everyone on the Iowa River. And so what's interesting is, to me, is perhaps the ability to do that on the Des Moines River and what that would mean to the city of Des Moines below that, and thousands and thousands of Iowans. So those standards on the Iowa River mean that I think it's 47 municipalities above the tribe will have an opportunity, because of those standard requirements, to receive funding from the federal government to make upgrades and things that they need to do to their systems in order to protect discharges into the Iowa River. And I think it's, to me, I can't even really explain in terms as a natural resources manager what that means to be able to work in this manner. so I hope that impresses upon you when I say I would never be able to do this kind of work anywhere else in Iowa and perhaps in this nation, frankly, in this day and age. There are roughly 570 federally recognized tribes in the United States of America. About 270 of those are in Alaska. Alaskan tribes do not own any land, and they have almost no land reserved to them. They do not live on reservations. They live in little villages that are really small. And I'm sure you can understand, what do we all know about Alaska? What was the plan there to make sure the tribes, frankly, had no right to what was under the land? So the Alaskan tribes, in my opinion and observation from work I've gotten to do there, the genocide is still occurring upon the Alaskan tribes. I don't think that will ever end, frankly. And it's very concerning and very disturbing. And it is about controlling oil and other mining rights and things of that nature. So there are roughly 47 federally recognized tribes that have water quality standards at this time in the United States of America. Tying into the standards is that the tribe's land is predominantly in trust with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. This map shows, this is again the land in Tama County. The green is in trust with the BIA, the red is in process. Generally, lands, as the tribe procures them, are always in process of being put into trust. It's a pretty slow process, and the current presidential administration at any given time, not perhaps the current one, impacts, they make policy changes regarding how complicated it is or isn't to get land into trust. So when in trust with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, that's like any trust relationship. A lot of large farming families have trusts, to just ensure that that land stays available to the community or the family till the end of time. So the Meskwaki people are fully supported by the Meskwaki tribe. The tribe owns the homes they live in, helps, plows their snow in the winter, doesn't mow their lawns, but maintains the homes with a very robust government operations of departments, 29 departments that support that and work in workforce development to that. So the Meskwaki people are maintaining their own facilities and homes as well. So the land in Palo Alto County is not in trust. This is just a quick photo of all the land that is in prairie or conservation preserve. So you can see the prairies in the river bottom and flanking the woodland areas to also help protect water quality. And that's kind of the end of my rudimentary slide. But my favorite part of speaking is always question and answer, because I can go on forever with facts, but it's more fun when you guys ask me what you want to hear and we can have conversation. So let's go into that. If you guys are ready.
If you'll raise your hand, I will bring the microphone to you.
Thank you for being here today.
Sure.
Can you tell me, is there some type of siphon that the natives receive annually?
Do you mean particular, the whole community or particular or individuals?
Well, I think an individual has to qualify relating his closeness to being a native.
Yeah, so I think I know just what you're referring to. So most tribes in the United States of America have an enrollment process. Some are based upon blood quantum, some are not. The Meskwaki are not. So what I love about the questions is it makes me talk about cool stuff you want to hear, I guess. So the Meskwaki are a patriarchal society. So lineage comes from the male side of the family. And so there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions about this patriarchal society, but aren't we all living in a patriarchal society?
Yeah.
Thank you. But there's a lot of different ways this is designed, right? So there's this, so your father must be enrolled Meskwaki for you to be enrolled Meskwaki. Your mother can be of any race or culture. If your mother is enrolled Meskwaki and your father is not, then you will not be enrolled. And of course, there are certain benefits, and a lot of it is just frankly economics. The tribe cannot financially provide housing and support, I don't know how many thousands of people, so right now tribal enrollment is about 1,500 people, to my understanding. About 800 of those live on the settlement. Some have never perhaps even lived in Iowa or on the settlement. So certain, yes, very specific benefits are tied directly only to enrolled folks, but then there's what is referred to as the descendant lineage, which technically I'm a descendant, right? Because my dad is Caucasian. I had never heard that term until I came to work for the Meskwaki people. I think traditionally we're called half-breeds as well. That's not, that's okay. We laugh about these, so it's okay. But the descendant, yes, would be not enrolled, and then they try to be very respectful and very specific. So we have a policy on meat distribution of the buffalo. So we raise, right now we have 85 buffalo head. We just had a winter calf, which I've never seen the herd do that. An older cow just calved on Thanksgiving. So hopefully that little guy's doing good. I'm sure he's fine. But we have a very specific policy about distribution of meat and of non-edible goods, because the buffalo are also used for arts and crafts, games, bones, cultural reasons. So although they are plains buffalo and the tribe would have initially lived alongside woodlands bison, as they became a plains tribe, they did live alongside plains bison, but only in about the last 150 years or so. So we can distribute meat and goods to descendants, but again, that's very specific by policy. The tribe is governed by a tribal council that is generally 7 elected individuals with 4-year terms. And they are over all businesses, all government, the school, the medical clinic. They have a robust medical and dental clinic. All aspects of the community. So they're making these decisions also. The casino, which is tied to that benefit, that funding benefit that individuals do receive who are enrolled. And I've found it to be very interesting. The tribes in the United States of America and their connection to the gaming industry is pretty mind-blowing. Even their connections to Las Vegas. It's very common for national conferences to almost always be held in Vegas for those reasons, for the tribal nations. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs is heavily involved in the gaming commissions for each tribe. And there are very strict policies and laws about the management of those casinos. So that ties to what is called the per cap that individuals receive. Some tribes have per cap, some tribes do not. I have witnessed per cap being $90,000 a month per person and $200 per month per person. It really varies across the number of people which can have very detrimental effects, the number of people in the tribe, and then the revenue from the casino. And then of course the tribes own other, businesses like any other incorporation would.
From your slide, it looked like Meskwaki originated in northern New England, St. Louis River area. Is that where the red earth was? Was it full of iron?
I've never been asked that question. My understanding is that the original stories of the Meskwaki people coming from the earth, and if you might know more about the red earth there, it sounds like, than I do.
No, I was born in Minnesota, red earth, because it's full of iron.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
We have a question from online. Is it possible for folks outside of the Meskwaki community to visit any of the Meskwaki natural areas?
No. The settlement is, respectfully, of course, you can drive through it and look around. But respectfully, if you were to stop and go for a hike, you would be asked to leave. Yeah. It's an interesting relationship they have in the community there, it's pretty dynamic too. I recently, in part of my role of working with the tribe, I work pretty heavily with the United States Department of Ag, EPA, and FEMA. Those are probably the three large agencies that I work the most with. And I remember the first time I went down to the USDA office in Tama, and it was kind of a different experience for me because, well, as DNR, Iowa DNR Joan, I always had a uniform on, and I don't think I ever really understood the respect that commanded. And then as Joan raised, I was raised near Toddville, but we were sent to private Catholic schools in Cedar Rapids because of racism. So my brother Dale was born in 1951, and he would go to kindergarten at the community school, Alburnett, in about 56, I think. And frankly was getting beat up every day because of his skin color, essentially. And so my dad was working for a Lynn Co-op then in Marion, and he said, I'll just take him to school at St. Joe's every day. So that's what, although that's really what started our relationship with Catholic schools, even though my mom was a really stout Catholic as well. My dad was not. So consequently, I never realized, probably, I would say till I was in my 30s, that I wasn't I didn't look white. Does that make sense? I know it's very confusing. I think I was so protected by my parents and sort of isolated that I didn't really, of course I understood my Native heritage and I loved it and thought it was so cool, but I didn't understand how other people were seeing me, if that makes sense. And so here I am at this counter and I'm being, actually, it was kind of an unfriendly experience. And later it dawned on me, oh, they think I was Meskwaki. And I didn't really understand that until I started to interact in the town of Tama, Toledo, if that makes sense. So it was foreign to me, and I was foreign to them. And so it would prompt me to actually just seek, as I work nation to nation, I really work with whatever executive appointed director of the USDA is in Iowa. And at that time, it was a man named Matt Russell. If any of you know him, if you don't, I mean, he's just a wonderful person. Mm-hmm. And he and I worked very hard to really mend these relationships. And he learned through working with his team in the Tama office that, yeah, it makes sense. There's an age-old history of the Meskwaki bought my great-great-grandfather's land, and now it's a pile of weeds, and they don't even pay taxes on it. So now it's not a pile of weeds, it's a prairie. But so these are long historical trauma on both sides. And so that is really interesting in my role as a land manager. I didn't expect to be healing trauma, but I get to do that. And it's really good for me and it's really good for them. I think I'm rambling.
We're over here.
Yes, Joan. Are the Meskwakis concerned about the casino that's being built here in Cedar Rapids? And in fact, that's what I'm having.
Very concerned. The Meskwaki did come here and when did they have the meeting? Right before the commission was going to vote again. The Meskwaki presented at that meeting. The Meskwaki, of course, do their own market. I mean, they have all kinds of professionals running that casino. They do their own market analysis. And their conclusion that they presented was that the Cedar Rapids casino is frankly just going to pull business from the other major casinos, which should drop Meskwaki by about 20%, their income, to give to this casino. And, you know, that casino is supporting an entire nation of people. You know, they're not collecting taxes like everybody else is. So yeah, that's gonna be a huge detriment to the tribe. I frankly, personally wonder about, you know, I'm rolling up on 50 now, about my generation and my son's generation. Are we gonna go to casinos? I wonder about the gambling industry, frankly, period. And what are the tribe's plans regarding that? But the tribe is very much against the Cedar Rapids Casino, and did present that, and obviously things went a different way.
Hear about the museum you have on the settlement.
Yeah, the museum is awesome. I hope you'll all find time if you're driving through on Highway 30, or to make a special trip over. Our historic preservation director is Jonathan Buffalo. He is threatening retirement any day. He's been in his position. I think he's the tribe's first historic preservation director, extremely knowledgeable. He's been in that role, I think, since the 1990s. The museum is located down in a valley at tribal headquarters, where our tribal government compound is, more or less. Tribal courts are there also. The tribe does have their own attorney general's office, judges, lawyers, court system. And it's anyway, so the museum is next to the courts. It is open 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. You need to plan at least an hour to peruse that museum, and it just takes you step by step by step through the Meskwaki history to where they are today. Of course, it's free of cost to visit that, and it's Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30.
Do you need reservations?
No, no.
Another question online. Does the tribe farm land on the settlement? If
Just,
so, what,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
if so, what do you raise and do you sell meat to the public?
Yep. So, as far as farming, there, within our workforce development department, there are two programs. One is food sovereignty, and one is Red Earth Gardens. Food sovereignty is, obviously the culturally specific foods, the corn, the beans, and the squash that are specific to the Meskwaki people. They still, of course, have original seeds. Those are from their original seed saving efforts, you know, from as far back as they know. So they do raise those there. They support community gardens. There's about 350 homes on the settlement, and they till, I think, about 100 gardens for community members. Plus they have community gardens at Food Sovereignty if people would rather go there. We do work together to promote hunting and harvesting in the community to support that tradition throughout the youth and adults and elders. Then there is Red Earth Gardens, which is behind the casino. That is more standard modern produce, chickens, honey. They have their own honeybee hives, and you can purchase those goods. They also have a farmer's market. All these things you can usually see online if you go to the Meskwaki Nation website. But and then they do distribute that produce and food throughout the community at no cost. And then we have just a small amount of organic farming, just traditional corn bean rotation, which is land that is set aside for development in the future. So, and that is contracted out by a local organic farmer.
Yeah. What are their? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm interested in the relationship between tribal jurisdiction and jurisdiction of the surrounding governments when it comes to crime. For instance, you get a lot of people coming in from the outside to the casino.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering when there is an altercation or violence or anything like that, are there clear lines about whose jurisdiction they're in, and what is the relationship then between the law enforcement tribal law enforcement and outside law enforcement?
Yep, that's a very good question. And when I answer your questions, I want you to understand that I try to be very frank and very honest and transparent. I don't mean to offend anyone. And that is one situation that's a little bit, again, like when I talked about our relationship with the USDA, right? So you're talking, this community of people have been there since 1857. And yet today, there's still ongoing relationship issues. So the tribe has their own police department, the Meskwaki Nation Police Department. They have, I think, about 15 full-time officers and then chiefs above that. They are funded through a Bureau of Indian Affairs contract called 638 contract, which is there's different levels of course, there's always that development of self-determination where you can have different types of funding relationships with your federal partner that have more or less independence. And so the contract is pretty robust. So they receive a lot of benefits from the BIA, training, equipment, things of that nature, to maintain that relationship, but they are not controlled by the BIA. So some tribes have BIA officers or BIA law enforcement on site at all times. We can call in the BIA to help with an investigation or something of that nature, but when there's an issue anywhere on the settlement, the Meskwaki Nation Police Department is handling that. And then you're going to be, if you receive charges, you're going to be handled in the tribal court system. So that is a little unique, obviously. They do not have a jail or holding facility. We are working to move toward that at this time, actually. Excuse me. That means, though, that we do need to have relationships with outside law enforcement, and that can be rather strained. So we do find that, and I find that too with fire. So we manage our own prescribed fire, wildland firefighting. I've been a wildland firefighter and burn boss for just about 20 years. And now I work closely with the BIA, and they are essentially the burn boss, which is nice. So again, I receive funding for equipment and training and things like that for staff who are wildland firefighters. We bring firefighters from other tribes. We're always the first, we're the furthest south in the region. So we're always the first fires. So it's fun for the other tribes to come and kind of do their training in the spring with us. So that being said, we do have strains with the local fire departments and the local PD. And I'm sure it's hard for them when I think of it from their perspective to have these really firm boundaries that's another nation. We welcome them to come and assist and partner, and we go and assist and partner with them. But we do find that they don't like to reciprocate, to be most tactful. I think they get concerned about liability. I mean, I understand liability if someone was injured, one of their officers were injured on the settlement, things like that. But recently, our Attorney General did sign an agreement with the tribe to make those relationships more robust. So it's and that's good to get that support from that level to help support the more local relationships. So we're excited about that. But it can be complicated and understandably so. Yeah. So it's very unfortunate, but Tama doesn't like to share their jail. So we do have to drive inmates to Des Moines, to Polk County. And that, I'll be on, I want to be tactful, but I also want to be upfront that, those of us who provide these services, whether it be the Attorney General's office or myself as land manager, or I don't mean this to be negative, but we do have continual concerns that a lot of this stems from racism. So just to be most open about that. But we know we have to do our part to mend that, and so that's how we keep trying to function.
Yes. What are the discussions amongst the tribe regarding the recovering 20% that was lost with the casinos?
So it's not lost yet, I think I don't know when the Cedar Rapids Casino is supposed to come online, but it's
End of next year.
okay. I think there'll be a window of time when that has to ramp up and then occur. So I would think it would be a few years before they're really being able to see that. You know, I'm not privy to those conversations, frankly. Yeah. I don't know. Sorry. They just put in a Starbucks, so maybe that's part of the, I don't know. They did, they put a Starbucks in the casino, which is beautiful. Maybe that's part of the plan.
I have a couple questions here. The first is there any kind of committee trying to improve relations between the city and the tribe? An ongoing committee sort of thing?
No, I don't think so. I think those of us, as we work for the tribe and we do our work, we're expected to put forth a positive attitude and exemplary standard and always be a good neighbor and but yet maintain that strong sovereignty. It's complicated. So like I hire the Montour Fire Department to always come to our burns and sit there with their tenders. So we have backup water. I pay them for that. And they need that for training themselves. So it's important to have that positive relationship. I reach out to Tama, Toledo if they want to join us, but if you know they don't. And so you know, we just keep trying to put that foot forward. I think that it's complicated, frankly. It's very complicated.
My other question, since there are various roles to be had, for example, tending the buffalo, doing whatever else, how is it determined who has those roles? Are people actually paid?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I didn't go into a lot of details about the department itself. So with tribal operations, with those 29 departments, you know, there's public works, there's workforce development, there's the seniors center. You know, they do have a seniors, it's not really assisted living, but more like independent living. They are working toward building a nursing home and assisted living, actually. I don't know. There's obviously historic preservation. There's finance. There's grants management. You know, then I mean, there's all kinds of departments. Then there's incorporations, businesses. The tribe does have a hemp business. So natural resources department, we are, you know, if you go online, you'll see the tribe's constitution and their titles, their code sections. Every department is monitored by a code section or policy, just like any other governing body. And natural resources is expected to manage the land, trees, plants, wildlife, water, and any environmental programs. So there's two branches within natural resources. One is land and wildlife. One is the environmental branch. The environmental branch is 100% funded by the Environmental Protection Agency. There we do air quality, water quality, soil quality, wetland work. And then land and wildlife is really that boots on the ground, buffalo herd management, deer, chronic wasting disease, unfortunately, prairie management. You know, they might then get involved with wetland restoration, forestry work. So I have heavy equipment operators, conservation aides, foresters, environmental specialists, all who I am the Jane of all trades, who guides them as best as I can in all these different areas, some of which I'm an expert in. I would say my expertise is land management and wildlife, so prairies. I became very passionate about prairies as a young land manager. So prairies and buffalo and wildlife. I have learned a lot from my relationship with the EPA and their expectations of me and how I can lead the environmental branch as well. But that answers your question.
Help me to thank Joan, please.
Thank you so much. I
you.
learned so much from the get-go, so I hope everyone else did as well, whether you're in the room or online. Thank you so much for being here and being with us. As I said before, January 2nd, We will be virtual only, talking about immigration, ICE, and all of that with a panel of experts on that. I would just say, have a great December and a great weekend, and thank you so much. Take care.
Please bring all your
Oh,
things.
yes, for those in the room, please bring all of your stuff over to the corner for your lunches.